to every single one of us. This, I'm telling you, is the fulfillment of a dream. And one of the things I would like to say is that it can happen to any single one of us. The bottom line is every single one of us has a gift. And at some point, whether we like it or not, we're going to have to make sure that we make full use of the gift. There are 4 cornerstones of Women's World, and it's to encourage and equip women to grow spiritually. And so as we chase the money, as we develop our skills, our talents, the most important thing we need to know is that whatever we do, we must always keep God's kingdom first. It is God first. And sometimes we may say, oh, my strength, I'm intelligent. Yes, you are. I've got the skill, I've got the talent. But Deuteronomy 8:18 talks about the fact that it is God who gives us the power. And so we owe it to him. We are stewards of the gifts, the talents, and the skill. And we owe it to God to make sure we develop them and be the best. I believe that as women, we must be emotionally healthy. We must have mind checks. And that's something I'm very, very passionate about. I suffered as a young convert. I really battled with my mind. When you talk about literally sitting in service sometimes and thinking I'm going to go crazy in a minute. As a pastor, I know what it means to deal with compulsive, obsessive thoughts. I've dealt with all kinds of thoughts, and I'm glad one of the things I finally have done this year is to launch what is going to be called MAP. Mind and purpose, P48, Philippians 4 verse 8. How to reign in our minds. I've done it. And I said to my husband sometimes when some news come when there's some breaking news that somebody did this and somebody did that, I said to my husband, I know exactly what happened. I know what it means to not even be aware of what you're thinking, and it becomes an obsession, and you have to deal with it. And so I'm very passionate about the mind. And also, the last thing that I really believe that we need to know how to do is to, whether we're starting a business or whether we are already in business or whether we're looking to develop our career, is to make sure that we're the best at whatever it is that we do. So we have such a rich program for us today. And I'm just going to move straight on. And honestly speaking, we are going to have a fantastic time. So ladies, if you have in our midst somebody who has, should I say, lived it all, what do? You squeeze every single thing from her. But for someone who runs a network of almost 170 professionally qualified exercise teachers, they run 2,000 weekly classes across the UK and have over 70,000 members. She's also a presenter and author. She's a mother, and she's a wife. So ladies, let us give Rosemary a round of applause as we... Yes, so Rosemary, I'm sure the ladies are eager. Even I've heard your story, but I'm really eager to hear your story. So you tell us.
Wow.
What made you start the business? What happened?
Well, I was overweight. So 45 years ago, I was about 2.5 stone overweight because I'd gained weight having done a cordon bleu cookery course. So I suddenly discovered this fabulous food and couldn't stop eating it. And so I put on about 2.5 stone, and then I learned about how to lose that weight. So then I started a little class with 6 of my neighbours in my kitchen to try and help them to lose weight. And also I wanted to teach them to make the most of themselves. And when I was a teenager, I went on a good grooming course, a little bit like a sort of layman's modelling course, but it was basically to learn a bit how to make the most of yourself. And so I incorporated that into my teaching of this little group. And in 6 weeks, they'd all lost a stone now. They all started looking super. So we went to the local village hall. I invested £8 into buying, having printed 30 posters. So I dotted those around the village. 29 people came to my first class, and that was in 1971. That was a long, long time ago. And then 9 years later, I was approached by IPC magazines, who publish, loads of magazines, Woman, Woman's Own, all that sort of thing. And would I run classes for them nationally? So I sold my business to them And I ran it nationally for them for about 4.5 years, but it was a horrible time. It really was a horrible time because I wasn't ready for it. And they were a big business. They were only interested in the bottom line. When I ran my classes, we were just having fun. And so it was a very difficult time. So that all closed down. And then I went to sort of go freelance again. Well, then it all closed in 85. So in 86, I was, I should say that in about 1982, my husband and I split up. One of the casualties of when you're working for a big company, you're working all hours God sends, and unfortunately your priorities go a bit out the window. We drifted further and further apart, and so we decided to split up. And then a few months later I met Mike, and Mike and I sort of went out together for a while, and then that split up. So we're now in 85, 86, where the business has now folded. I'm already divorced, and then Mike and I had split up. And so there I was in the February of 1986, ill, in bed with gallstones. We didn't know it was gallstones at the time, but it was gallstones. And I was on my own, and I went into hospital. And while I was in hospital, I saw in a magazine an advertisement for a book called Power for Living. Now, advertising this book were 3 notable people. There was Lord Tony Pandy, who at the time was the Speaker of the House of Commons. There was Gerald Williams, who was a tennis commentator in those days. He's retired now, still alive. He keeps hearing I keep mentioning his name. And Cliff Richard. And these were all saying that they had found power for living through having a personal relationship with God and with Jesus. And would I like to send for this free book? So I sent for the free book, and it came back 10 days later. It was called Power for Living. And as I was waiting to go back into hospital to have a cholecystogram to see how severe my gallstones were, I was reading this book, and it was as though it had been written just for me. And it was talking to me about Christianity in everyday language that I utterly understood. And it really, really spoke to me. And on page 59, there was this prayer, which by the evening I'd sort of got to page 59, and I was sort of sitting in bed and carrying on reading it. I couldn't put it down, it was fantastic. And it was basically saying that, I was sort of asking God for forgiveness, this little prayer that was in there, asking God for forgiveness of all the things that I'd done wrong, and I'd done plenty wrong in my life. And that, now I wanted to surrender myself to him, and I wanted to basically, from here on, he would be in charge. And I can't tell you that there were any puffs of smoke or bangs or flames or anything like that, nothing like that at all. But I actually got out of bed and knelt at the side of my bed to pray this prayer. And I got back into bed, and I just tell you, I felt brand new. I felt as though I had been completely washed through. And I sat in bed, and I just knew it was going to be all right. I knew everything was going to be all right because my house was going to be up for sale. I was, anyway, all of those things I've just told you. And I just knew that sort of God was now the chairman of my board of my life. And that from here on in, he was just saying, right, just follow me. You'll be fine. And it was incredible. Well, it only took 2 days before Mike came knocking on the door. And he came on the pretext of wanting to see the dogs. But he said that he was actually finding it very difficult to live without me. And I said, I feel the same. And that night, we decided to sort of go back together. And that night, I felt God say to me, you should marry Mike. And so I waited till the following Friday. And then we were out for a meal. And then I proposed to him. And then we got married in the July. We were broke. We were broke, but I was being asked to go over to Austria for a week to train the Austrians to be fit, which is a joke because they have to be the fittest nation on on this earth. But it was a free holiday, and so I said, "Please, can I bring my husband and we'll have it as a honeymoon?" And so our wedding day was determined by the date of this holiday. But we did exactly that, and we were so broke. We were over there. We would buy one newspaper each day, and we didn't have any lunch. And then we obviously were fed by the hotel in the evening, and our flights were paid for, and so on. And got home, and it was amazing how, while I was in hospital with my gallstones, I was told that I had to eat a low-fat diet if I wanted to avoid surgery. And what happened to me was my whole figure changed. I only lost 6 pounds. I was about 8.5 stone when I went into hospital. I only lost 6 pounds from eating low fat, but it all went from my hips and thighs. I normally had a very big bottom and I had a real sort of thighs like this, jodhpur thighs. But suddenly they just became streamlined. And if you know your fruit, the pears, I went from being a Williams pear shape to a conference pear shape. So still a pear shape, but a much narrower one. And then having discovered about the low-fat eating, what it did to my shape, I had written 3 books before. I then set about doing a trial to see whether the low-fat eating worked for everybody. So I did a trial, and the result of that was a book called The Hip and Thigh Diet, which came out in January '88, and it was just phenomenal. And it was #1. I mean, it was in the charts for 9 years. It sold 1 million copies the first year. Then I did a sequel that sold 1 million copies. I went all around. Mike and I went all around the world on promotional tours for this book. I mean, my goodness me, when God said, look, just follow me, I really didn't know he had all that in store for me.